Okay. So, congratulations. Today is your day. You're building an app. You're off and away. Sorry. You're on your own. You know what you know. And you are the dev that decides where your users would go. So, hi everyone, I'm Britt Barak. I'm a GD for Android. I work for Nexmo. I'm doing developer relations there, mainly Android stuff, and I'll tell you a little bit about it later. I'm leading Women Tech Makers in Israel. I came all the way from Israel to here to be at this event. It's my second time here, and I love this conference. It's one of my favorite ones, honestly. So I'm really happy to be here with you all. Today we are going to talk about navigation a little bit. How does it work in Android? A little bit of the new stuff. I have so much different stuff to talk to you about, so we'll see what you're interested in. All right, so when an activity is born and born into the world, it basically looks for a home. So Android is very happy to provide it a home. This home is called a task. This task has a stack where the activity can sleep and stay and relax and chill. This home has a name. Usually it's the package name, but not always. We'll talk about it a little bit later. And then activities are very welcome to go in and join the stack, the activity stack. So every time an activity is pushed in, it's just pushed in the stack, just one after the other, just like a regular stack. And every time we click on the back button, you can imagine the activities were just pushed out of the stack. That's great. So this is why this stack is known as activities stack, because it holds activities, or a backstack, which you probably have heard that. Why? Because this basically defines what happens to the user. Where would he be navigated to, right, when he clicks back? So this is why we call it a backstack or an activity stack. And that's kind of perfect. After all of the activities are gone and popped off this stack, Android comes and can just kill the stack and the task, and then another task can go in the foreground. So another task, even your launcher task, is one of these tasks, one of these homes, and it comes back to the foreground for us to see, for the user to engage with. So that's perfect, right? So that's perfect, but except when it's not, because sometimes it won't. Sometimes it won't be perfect. Sometimes it doesn't really fit what we want to give to our users. Let me give you an example. So we'll have something like more concrete to talk about. So I work at Nexmo on an SDK that does combines all the communication channels that we have with our users. So it's phone calls and chats and videos and everything in one SDK. So since I'm working on an SDK and not an app currently, I get to talk to a lot of developers to see how would they use our SDK. It's still in developer preview, so we're kind of experiencing that. And I want to show you a little bit of like how would people use that. So let's see. Let's take a small example, just like different components, and let's see how other developers might put them together in the navigation flow of their app. So this is the conversation screen that we're going to have. Also on our app, we'll have like the conversation itself. So it has messages and like chats, for example, but also calls that we can do, phone calls and video calls. That's me talking to myself, I know. And the contact details and so on. So many screens, but let's take just these ones for examples. So the navigation behavior that I talked to you about a little bit before there are a few ways that it can be modified and costumed from what we discussed and I showed before. One way is to use on the manifest, on our Android manifest, the launch mode attribute. And another way is to do it with code with intent flags. So can you hear me OK? Okay. And another way is to use it with intent flags. They basically can do the same. Sometimes the intent flags are more granular, so you have to have few flags in order to do the same thing as the launch mode give you. So I'm going to show here, just for simplicity and like cleaner slides, I'm going to show you the launch modes, but you should know that you can do everything with code with the intent flags that I'll post later, all the details. So let's start with the standard way, or if we don't custom anything, we don't modify anything at all. The thing that's going to happen on our stack, that if we start with a conversation list, and we click on one conversation, then a conversation activity pops in the stack. And every time we want to launch another activity, any type of activity, even the conversation, it would push in the stack another instance of the same thing. So even if I got now a notification or something like that, and another ping conversation, so another conversation with me and Dan, I want to push the same thing in the stack, another instance, a new instance of our conversation will just be pushed in the stack. What do you think about that? Would it always be like the best thing? Oh my God, why are you so quiet? Do you think, like, where can it be like a little bit off in the experience? If we want to go from the top one to the first one. OK, so there's so if we're on the conversation, on the top conversation, and that's what the user is engaged with, and he wants to go back to the conversation list, potentially he needs to go back so many times, right? And it can be quite tiring. And maybe we don't want to do that. Also, since the two instances is basically supposed to be the same conversations, and they don't know one about the other, right? So if I open the conversation with Dan, and I started typing something, and then I got the notification, so the UI changes, right? And then I got a notification, or I just opened the conversation again. So it's the same conversation that opened up, but it doesn't know about the state and what I started typing already on the conversation instance that was beneath it, right? So it can be a little bit inconsistent. So sometimes it's not what we want to do. And one way to handle that is to change the launch mode into a single top. So what does single top mean? It means that if we have our stack with a conversation list and then the conversation, and then I want to launch another conversation, what it would do, it would first look if on the top of the task there is already one conversation instance for the same activity. And if it does, instead of creating another instance and pushing it in, it would just push the new data with the new intent onto the instance that we already have, so that we can take the new data and update it on the conversation itself, on the activity that we had. So that's the single top. It works only if we're on the top of the stack. So it means that if from the conversation I want to start now a phone call, I can start the phone call and push the phone call conversation into the app. And then if I want to start the conversation again, from some place, I have another conversation. What do you think would happen now? Would it push it onto the stack or not? It would push it, right, because the conversation instance that we have is not on the top, so it has no problem pushing it. And this is basically how it works. This is a great way. It's very common, usually when we do searches, for example. So if I have the conversation list and I want to do like a search, so I go to the search activity and I can search for stuff like for the thank you that I write to people, and then I would launch the search again with the new data. So instead of thank you, I would search for something else. Sorry, I troubles here. And instead of creating a new instance, we would just push the new data into the on new intent. And once again, as we said, it would save us a lot of clicks. Because instead of going back and seeing the last search results, we don't have to see all the irrelevant search results that we did before. And after we click back, the only thing we see is the conversation list with all the conversations as we started. So that's great, but what if I want only one instance? I want to have, we saw that I can have multiple conversation instances, for example, and I want just one instance of it. For example, the phone call, it doesn't make sense to have many phone call activities, right? Because we can talk on the phone with one person at a time. So let's say I want to have only one activity with a phone call. How can I do that? I can use a launch mode called a single. I can use it. What does that mean, or what does that do? So on this task, on the stack that is currently visible for us, for the users, I have the conversation list and the same story. I click, I go to a conversation, and then I have a phone call activity that I want to start. And let's say it has a single task launch mode this time. What it's going to do is going to create a new task for us. It's going to create a new task, a new stack, and it's going to push the phone call in there as the first one on the task. And then this is going to be the task that we currently see, that is currently visible for us, the green one. Next, I want to create another conversation, or I want to push a different conversation into the stack. It would just all go into the new task, into the new stack. All right? And then if I want to have a phone call, sorry, now I want to have a phone call, no trouble at all. Sorry, if I want to have a phone call, so no trouble. What it's going to do, since we ask for a single instance of this activity, what it's going to do is going to push the on new intent, the new data, the new intent. As you saw, it just finished everything that was above the activity, about the phone call activity, and just gave us the new data. And this is what is visible for us right now. Now, if we click back, what's going to happen? So we're first going back out of everything we had on the task that we actually are engaging with right now. So the phone call conversation, the phone call activity would go away. It would finish. And since we don't have anything on the green task now, we're going to be engaging with the blue stack now, because the green one is all over. So it's going to be finished. And this is what we're going to be engaging in currently. So the conversation and then the conversation list, that's it. So if you noticed, we have kind of a weird transition, right, between the phone call with the pink one, so with me and Dan, when I clicked back, it went over to the conversation activity that I had with the yellow guy. Who's the yellow guy? What's his name? Eric. Good. So this is kind of a weird transition, right? Because I don't think that's what we meant to do. We did want to have one activity for a phone call, but it has to be kind of consistent with the flow that we had before. So what else we can do? There's another launch mode, the last one, that is called a single instance. What would single instance do for us? So it's a little bit the same with a slightly different way. So we're going to start the same. On the conversation list task, I click on the conversation. I open a conversation activity. So it's a conversation. It's the yellow guy, so it's me and Eric. We have a conversation. And then I start a phone call, right? And a phone call now is a single instance and not a single task. So So what Android's going to do for us is going to open another task. Once again, it's going to open a new task, a new stack for us, and push the phone call in there. So it would be on the root. And now this is going to be the task that is visible for us. Now, the same scenario, we're going to have a conversation. Sorry, we're going to have a conversation activity again with me and Dan. But then the conversation, it cannot be on the task with the phone call, because single instance says we want to have one single instance of this activity, but it also have to be the single activity in the task. So Android would not allow the conversation activity to be in the same task, so it would find a different home for him. It would go on the previous stack, so it's on the conversation activity that we had on the blue stack. All right, and this would be the one that would be visible for us now. All right, so now when we have a phone call, another phone call with Dan, another one that is a single instance, what do you think is going to happen now? It's a new intent to where? Right, because we asked a single instance. Single instance means I need to have one instance of this activity in my system, but it also means you have to be the only one at the task. So Android is going to look for a task that holds already an activity with the phone call. It would find the green task, and then it would send a new intent to that. All right. Awesome. Another thing that I want to show you, though, that I found very useful lately is the document. It's the document thing that you can also do. So we talked about how you can navigate the back and the launch and the launch of the activities and the back stack and all of this kind of stuff. But sometimes you want to get to an activity quickly from the recent screen. And that's something that document is one way, and it's a very simple way to do that. We can also do it with the launch mode, but this would like a shortcut for that. The thing that it would give you is this experience. So for example, if I have an activity with all the calls, and I want to start a call, what I can do is create a call activity, which is a document. And then every time I click on a call, it would open a new task for me. And the new task would appear on the recent screen. So that's something that can be very useful if you want to do some stuff, two different things at the same time. So it would kind of, if you want to do things that are kind of separate. So you have two separate tasks that you want to do to be able to do at the same time. So for example, when I'm on a conversation, I might want to be able to check out the conversations, the tasks, the chats that I had before, the messages. Maybe I would need to, when you call a call center, for example, and you need to look for some details that you had before on some kind of a chat, and click on the digit in order to insert a PIN code or something like that. So this is something that would be very helpful for you. So this is something that you can do as well. All right. So we talked about a few stuff that you can do with your activities. And that's good, because our applications have only activities, right? Yeah, so not so much, maybe yes, but sometimes we don't, because sometimes we won't. Sometimes we won't have only activities, and I think that usually actually we don't have only activities. So what happens when we talk about fragments? When we talk about fragments, so each activity has a fragment each fragment has the activity that it is attached to, right? So the activity on the stack actually holds the fragment as well. And when we launch another fragment, it would be added to the stack with the activity on the previous fragment. And then when we do the back click, the last fragment that we see would finish, and then the second fragment. And then when there are no fragments at all to show there, then the activity itself would be ready to disappear. So actually, I can show you this is part of the business app that we're working on. So check out the navigation here. Only here, I have a navigation drawer. I have the tabs. I have like a pager, and I have bottom tabs. And all of those, if you've ever implemented any one of them, you should know that they all use fragments. So actually, pair activity, we have multiple fragment pair activity. Even if we didn't try that hard, it's very easy to do that, to get to the situation when you have tons of fragments and like one or less activities. So for that reason, Less.io, Android team gave us the new navigation component, which is very cool and very exciting, especially if you work with a lot of fragment as we. Currently, it's still in alpha. Just last week, alpha 5 was released, I think, so it's under like heavy development. So this is why I decided to show just a little bit about that, and not to dive in a lot of details. But it's very cool and very exciting for me, everything that's happening there. In order to have it on your Android Studio and to be able to play around with it, you have to have Android Studio 3.2, the Canary or the beta releases. And also, you should know that it focuses a lot on fragments, right? So everything we'll see here, I know we talked about activities before, but everything we're going to see now, we'll talk about fragments for specific activity, for a single activity. So it's like a little bit of a change of a mindset. Basically, after we add the library into our project, you'll be able to add another type of resource, a navigation resource. So same way we have with layouts, that we have a layout XML and layout resource, and then we have an editor, a visual editor, to edit everything there. The same thing we're going to have with the navigation component. So we have this editor. Everything we do here actually produces XML lines of code. This is the new tag for the navigation with an ID, and everything we'll do will be added up in between that for this tag. So first thing we want to do is to choose the destinations of the flow that we're going to provide to our users. What do I mean by that? So if we look at the editor, on the top you'll have this little button for adding the destinations. And if you click that, you're going to see a list of all the activities and fragments that you have on your app. And what I want to do now is to choose all the destinations, so everything that user can do with a specific flow, so inside a specific activity. So let's say a little bit of what I showed you before. I have a conversation list, and then I have the search fragment, and I have the conversation fragment, and I have the phone call and the video. Everything are fragments now. And since the user can move between them and they have connections between one another, everything can be in the same flow. This is what it means. So I choose all the destinations that make sense together. And each one of them currently are fragments. You would be able to add also activities, but activities can only end a flow and not start a flow and not create connections between the other destinations. There's also, you can do a custom type. We're not going to talk about it today, though. I'm going to post a little bit, a post a little bit later if you want to read about that. The ID is something that we choose, and we can reference this destination from anywhere in the app, and we'll see it a little bit later. And the class is the actual class for the destination, so the actual fragment, the Java, or the Kotlin code. One of the destinations have to be set as a start destination, because we want to know where to start with, right? So if this navigation graph launches, where do we need to start? On this case, it would make sense for us to start with the conversation list, right? After you choose one destination as a start destination, so you have a home icon indicating that this is the first one. So after we did that, after we have all the destinations, we need to build the flow. We need to understand which destination can go to the other destination, to the next destination. And the way to do it is with actions. So we can add actions from the UI, and also just to draw like a line to actually like connect the destinations, and it creates like some kind of an error. This is the action that you want to do. So from the conversation list, I can go to a conversation. All right, now we want to do that for all of the destinations, and then instead of just getting this kind of a node, we'll get a really graph for the flow for our app, all of the different connections between the different fragments, between the different destinations. And now after we have this large graph, we need to host the graph somewhere. What do I mean by that? So this flow that we set up, so this movement between a fragment to the other one and the next, where is it going to be shown? Where are the fragments are going to be actually located physically? Where are we going to see them in the layout? So we need to have some kind of a container for that. So on the layout of the activity, you want to set up a place, a container, for this navigation graph that we just created. It would be controlled by a nav host, which is basically an interface. So theoretically, you can go ahead and implement it yourself, but there is an implementation that is given us for free that is called nav host fragment. So the nav host fragment is the actual instance that we're going to put on our layout, add to our layout. So on the layout activity, we'll have a fragment tag. We can choose the UI, the width, and the height, and everything that we want, like a regular view there. So we give it some kind of an ID, which is important because we're going to reference it many times throughout the app, through the code. And then under the name, we're going to choose, of course, the nav host fragment. And we're going to tell him, OK, you're going to be in charge of this graph. Obviously, on your app, you're going to have a few graphs, a few different graphs, a graph pair activity, so a graph pair and nav host. So this is going to be the graph that you're going to be in charge in. And now we have a default nav host flag, which means, OK, you are actually going to take over the back navigation. Theoretically, we don't have to do that, but this is what's going to attach the back navigation to the graph. Next thing we need to do, or we want to do, if you have an up button on your activity, so you can choose to have the nav host also in charge of that, which is actually very, very cool because I don't know if you've ever written the guides to what's the back supposed to do, what's the up supposed to do, and like all the crazy navigation guidelines there. So I'm always confused with that, and so the fact that someone else can do it for me, it's really exciting for me. So that's great. Now, everything that's left for us to do is just to navigate. So what we want to do is to find the nav host that we just located on the layout. There are a few ways to do it with a fragment, with an activity, or with a specific view. and then to execute the navigation. So after you find the nav controller, you tell it, OK, please navigate. On the navigate, you can either give it a destination and then create all the actions and things yourself through the code. But you can just give it an action. It's the same action that we did on the graph before. Just give it an action and let it to do the navigation for you. A small, a small specific unique case, which is really cool, is if you want to navigate from a menu. So if you created a menu and you have a menu XML and you have all the items there, what you can do, which is pretty cool, is just to add an ID for the item. So a part of the icon and title that you already have there, you add an ID. And then on your code, on option item selected, if the ID matches a destination on the graph, it would know how to do the navigation for you, which is pretty cool. So the navigation UI, you ask it to please, if you find an item with the same ID, please do the navigation for me. And of course, if it doesn't find it, you want to do like the super method, and it would take care of it for you. So that's quite cool. Another cool thing that we can do when we set up the destination is to set up arguments, which is something that we always do because usually we need to pass some information, some data between one screen to the other. So for me, as we saw before, I have conversation list. I want to open a conversation. Obviously, I have to pass some data so it would know which conversation to open. So in my case, I have a conversation ID, like just a string that I can just pass over. You can do it just very simple with a bundle, but there's also a very cool thing called Safeargs that allows you to actually pass these arguments in a type-safe way, which is pretty cool. So even from the UI, you can create the argument that you want. So you give it a name, and you say the type that needs to be there, and you can choose a default value, which is very nice. And now, after you did that, some code is generated for you, and classes are generated for you with all these members, the action member, and the with action member and the arguments themselves with the types are going to be generated for you with getters and setters and everything for free. The way to get to this object is the conversation list going to have a conversation list directions. This is the object that we will use in order to pass the data somewhere. And the destination, so the conversation, would have a conversation args component object generated for you. So basically, very quickly, the way to do that, the way to use that, is actually when you create the action, before the navigation, you need to create the action. So I would go to the conversation list directions, the object that was created for me, and ask it, OK, please go to the open conversation action, which, once again, it was generated by the ID that we've given before. So open conversation action actually expects a string, right? So it expects a conversation ID. So I can just give it the conversation ID and use this action in order to navigate. So I grab the navigation controller, as we saw before, and ask to navigate with this action with the Safeargs. And now on the conversation fragment, all that is left for me to do is just go to the go to the conversation fragment args, the class that was generated for me, and it already has the members. So ask it from bundle of the arguments that the fragment has already. So from that, give me the conv ID, the conversation ID. Just give it to me as a string, and that's it, and everyone's happy. So this is a little bit about the actions. Another cool thing that I do want to go over a little bit is the Diplinks. So Diplinks is something that we more and more often use on our apps. Diplinks is basically a way for you to get to your app, to a specific place in your app from different places, from different apps, from URL links, from slices, widgets, notifications, anything like that. All of this would take you to your app in some place. It would open an activity for you. And this is why we talked before about all the options that you have to do, that you can do with the navigation and with the activities, because every launch mode that you decide that we talked about in the beginning would actually affect all this experience with all the the flow from different activities, from different apps, from your notifications, and so on. So this is why it's really important to know how you define your activity. So let's see how we can use the Diplinks. Basically, very easily from the UI, you can just define a URL if you have this kind of a thing that you want to use. So you can just create a Diplink for a specific conversation, for example, with the args and everything. You just put it there, and it would do some magic for you. On the activity, on the Android manifest, all you have to do is just give it the navigation graph. So you say, OK, this is the navigation graph, and you figure out what's the schema, what's the arguments, all of this stuff that we had to do before. It just generates everything for you with the navigation graph. It knows the places it should go. So now what we need to do is to create a pending intent. Pending intent is what we use for notification and for widgets and everything like that, and gives the power of other apps or from places outside of your app. It gives them the power to do things, to open activities from your specific app, the permissions to do that. So when we create a pending intent, the nav controller actually has a convenience method to create a Diplink or pending intent for us. And then after we create this pending intent, we can set a destination. So tell it, OK, go to this place. We can also add the arguments. So we can create an arguments, the conversation list, and everything that we want, and add it to the pending intent. So the destination is the conversation fragment. So it's a fragment. It's not an activity. And what it's going to do, actually, is because it knows all the navigation flow, because it has the graph, it would create the backstack and will do all this cool stuff for us. So we can create the pending intent, give it all the arguments that we want, and then just do create a pending intent and get the pending intent, basically, that we want to send, and then do whatever you want with it. Add it to the widget or send it on the notification. Do whatever you need. As I said, a very cool thing about it is that the entire backstack is created for you. So if we didn't have that and we just wanted to launch an activity, when we click back, what would happen? We would just go back to nowhere, to the place that we were before. So if I had to create a pending intent with a specific conversation, for example, if I want to go back, I would need to create the conversation list destination. I would need to do this connection for the users. And here it does it for free for me. All right. So another small thing that we can do with the actions, if we click on the action on the UI, and you'll see, this is for the add action, but also you can edit everything from here. So you can see that you can set up many, many other cool features. A small one is the pop behavior, which means that when we pop, so when we click back and we start popping off fragments, we can actually skip some fragments. So instead of just going one fragment back, as it would normally do, what it can do is just skip a few and go to another destination that was further away, which can be very, very useful for us. And another small thing is the transition. So transitions is actually the animation files on the XMLs that you can define there. And here you'll have a list of all of them to be very, very easily used. So we can define the enter, exit, pop enter, and pop exit. And for me, it was a little bit confusing when I started engaging with it a few years ago about what is the pop and the enter and the exit. So the names were a little bit confusing for me. So a few words about that. So basically, if I have on my stack a chat fragment, and I want to have a call fragment pushed in, so for that, I have an enter animation for the call fragment because it enters into the stack. And a chat fragment is going to go out. So it's going to have an exit animation. And now the stack is going to look like that. We'll have a call fragment, and that's it. And if I click back, we need to actually reverse the action that we did before, the enter and the exit. So when we click back, we'll have the pop action going on. So we'll have a pop enter for the fragment that was there before, so for the chat fragment, and pop exit to the fragment that is going to go out of the stack, which is the call fragment right now. OK. So basically, we went through really tons of stuff. And many stuff I know are confusing, and many details I will post later with some more details about the things that we discussed today. And I know that things are complicated and confusing, some of them. But will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. So 98 and 98.75% guaranteed. So dev, you'll move fragments. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Please keep in touch. I'm still here for the whole day. So if you have any questions or anything that you want us to talk more, so let's do that. I'll post a few blog posts about many of the stuff that we talked about, because there are many, many, many different topics that I wanted to cover just a little bit. So that's it. So hopefully it was interesting, and let's talk later. Let's catch up. Thank you.